and welcome back to Magnetic Rise. I am your host, Cikizwa A, Vilakazi, welcoming you back to another episode of Magnetic Rise, which is a podcast created by Strategnetic, where we dive into the deep and real stories behind how B2B companies grow, scale, and win. Today's conversation is going to be all about cutting through the noise. So the noise in your market, your marketing channels, and most importantly, your search results as well. Joining us is Justin Crawmer, the founder of Webtek, which is an SEO agency that's made a name for itself, helping startups and venture-backed companies. So yeah, Justin isn't just another SEO guy. He's a strategist who understands how search, content, and growth all come together to influence everything from customer acquisition to company valuation. So Justin, welcome to Magnetic Rise.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
That's awesome. So let's start at the beginning with your journey. How did you come to start Webtek, and what was the original vision for it?
Well, it's been a long journey because I've been doing this a very long time. Really 20 years experience in SEO, which is kind of unheard of. It's been around a long time. My partner and I have been doing link building before Google actually was around, or to get referral traffic from relevant websites to another. But my journey kind of started. If we go way back, I've always been an entrepreneur. I had a auto glass business, and I set up a website, and I went to Google the next day and I typed in Utah Auto Glass, and I was like, I'm a Utah Auto Glass company. Why is my website not here? And I didn't see it. And so I built this website on GoDaddy. Website Tonight, it was called way back then. And then, so I got curious about SEO and I started looking into it. Eventually, that led me to affiliate marketing, where I started doing lead generation for auto insurance. I got the website I had called getautoinsurance.net. It was a tiny little baby site, and got a ranking #1 for the word cheap auto insurance and cheap car insurance, and was ranking above Google and Progressive and all these big names, and started just kind of raking it in. Not luckily, but I was blessed to get a bunch of money while I slept, pretty much. And then as a result of that, I actually, and there's more to this journey, but I was also working at CHG Healthcare, which is one of the largest revenue generating companies here in Utah. It's a healthcare staffing agency, and they had like 6 brands, and I was head of search, so SEM director there. And I was managing, all these different brands, but kind of got into that position because I was able to prove that I could do this on my own. I had my own website ranking. I kind of did that as I started as an interactive marketing coordinator at that time, and kind of grew into this position where I really loved what I was doing. But eventually, I was like, I'm done with the corporate life, and so when I went to leave, they offered to double my salary, and I was like, I'm good, but I will be a consultant for you. So that was my first enterprise client. And then I actually went and worked for Skull Candy, which is it's a headphone brand, and I went there particularly to get, global e-commerce experience, global brand, big brand e-commerce experience, and I spent about 6 months there is all. But at meantime, I was already doing well on my own with my affiliate marketing and my consulting business, and as an employee for Skull Candy, and we got Skull Candy ranking #2 for the word headphones, right behind headphones.com at the time. And there was a lot about, at the time, I won't get too much into the details with that, but we got the right headphones page ranking for the right phrase. And that's a really big, important part about this whole thing is making sure you have a really good connection between the landing page and the inquiry. And we'll talk about this as we go here. But then eventually, I left Skull Candy, had the agency started with this CHG as my biggest new client, and then I started adding new clients, and eventually the affiliate marketing thing kind of changed, and it really turned into just full-time agency life. Taking on a lot of different clients across B2B, B2C, e-commerce, lead generation, kind of you name it. We worked now 1,500 clients over the last 20 years together, to Scott and I. So that's kind of the journey of where we started. And we've always kind of been a boutique agency, really caring the most about long-term relationships and high performance, trackable metrics. And, at CHG, I was always needing to speak to all the higher ups, talking about, not just like vanity metrics, like, oh, we're ranking on the first page for certain phrases. Always about like what, what is the return on this investment? What's the growth strategy? Like, if we spend more money on SEO, are we going to get the same return? It was very much speaking to these really financial minds and really having to create a business case for all the work that we were doing, not just being like rankings. You know what I mean? It's always about, always said that, links lead to rankings, to impressions, to traffic, to conversion, and conversion is what really matters. So I
Mm.
think that's enough about the journey. I could talk about this all day. Mhm.
Yeah, and that's quite a portfolio that you have there. Hey? It makes me very excited actually to hear your insights, especially because now we're going to get to understand everything that goes into getting such results, which is amazing. But before we jump into that, I do have one more question about your journey. What were some of the early challenges that you faced when you were trying to position Webtek as a boutique agency in a crowded market?
I mean, I guess a lot of it was like some of the challenges really was scaling. Honestly, scaling was probably one of the hardest parts, is just to figure out how to take such a unique, I don't know, the way that we did things was really manual and really like hands on. And so to scale that to lots of clients and lots of employees, that took a while to figure out. I think that was our biggest challenge, actually. Not necessarily in the positioning, because we've always been really performance based positioning. It was really, how can you scale such a really premium offering to serve lots of clients, and how do you train people to be Scott and Justin? Like, it was really, that took a minute, but we got that all figured out, thankfully, because we've been doing this long enough now. So
Okay, all right. Interesting. All right, let's move into what we're here to discuss, right? And let's start with the mistakes. What is the biggest mistake that you see B2B companies making when it comes to SEO?
Well, I think there's a few things, but number one, it's like treating it like a checklist. Like, we go through and we just do the audit. We do this, we do this, we do this, and not really starting with a really strong strategy. So whenever we take on a client, we always start by saying, "What's your goal?" Once we understand the goal, and the goal is usually going to be either lead generation or e-commerce usually, and there's variations of these things where what your goal is usually like click to call, click to email, form submission, maybe book an appointment on the lead gen side of things, or on e-commerce, it's about like sales usually, obviously. And then once we understand the goal, then we identify the audience. And the audience can have multiple segments within it, different personas, if you will. So you're going to be speaking to different people who are interested in your product or service for various reasons. And then once we understand the audience, then it's about keywords, and the keywords, we can get into that whole thing about why that's so important. But really understanding, we look at four main metrics that we can talk about, but essentially really making sure we understand top of funnel versus bottom funnel, middle funnel. Where are they at in the journey? Like, are they researching the topic? Versus, are they ready to buy that service now? And kind of figuring out how to meet them wherever they're at in that journey. So that's the keyword side of things. Once we know the keywords and the top ranking, the top web phrases we want to rank for, and it's not always about the biggest volume. It's about what's the most important phrases for, like, to help you get exactly the clients you're looking for, that audience. So it's your niche within the niche, and really figuring out exactly what those phrases are. It's so important that we have a really strong strategy before we start doing anything. And once we have the keywords identified, then we look at competition and seeing what are the best ranking websites in Google. Or now we're getting a whole lot we can get into about answer engine optimization and the evolution of search, how it's now search experience optimization, the search everything optimization, not search optimization. It's about the chat GPTs and all these other things of the world, not to mention Google AI overview, which we can get into also.
Mm-hmm.
But once we identify the competition, we can really easily easily, because we're doing it at this point, figure out why they're ranking where they are and what we need to do to get our clients to outrank them, essentially. And that's a really important part of this whole thing, is the competition. Once you have the competition dialed, then it's about content. So on page and off page content. On page content meaning all the pages on your website that you're trying to rank for, um, like the actual landing pages that are like the sales
Yeah.
pages, if you will. This is like blog content, which is supportive content that just kind of helps reinforce and signal to Google that this page over here is what you want to rank for. Off-page content is about link building. You guys might have heard of, SEO, like off-page or link juice, that kind of stuff. That's become even more important than it ever has, actually, with the onset of answer engines and the way that ChatGPT and these other ones build their knowledge base using their algorithms, similarly to the way Google has always done it. But the content distribution to establish relevancy, authority, and trust online is bigger than ever, actually. Now it's
Mm.
always about, like, when all these other engines are now pulling from multiple sources, and so you have to have all these votes, if you will, of other websites that are pointing to you as the thought leader or the subject matter expert or authority within the space. So then it's, that content strategy has always been super important. Not to mention the CRO, like the conversion rate optimization factors of the page itself. And we can talk about why Google cares a lot about that when it comes to engagement and when they do audition for positions. So when they're looking at your website versus other website and how well your website actually gets engagement, which is a reflection of how good an answer that is to the search query. And then it's about measuring and reporting. That's the final thing, which brings it back to goals. So how do you measure all the key metrics that bring it back to the original goal of conversion? Because it's not about vanity metrics, like we said before. It's not about being the first page for certain search phrase. It's about
Mm.
what is the quality of the lead you're generating compared to the audience you're trying to attract, or how good is your conversion of e-commerce sales, and that has to do with average order value and conversion rates and things like that. So I'll just stop there with that, but that's how we approach things, is making sure that you don't just go into SEO like, I'm going to rank for the biggest search volume phrases in my niche, because you might be ranking for a phrase that's, first of all, overly competitive
Mm.
and not that good of a converting phrase. And
Mm.
I do want to specify, we're not just an SEO agency. We do SEO, PPC, and CRO, which are all really important in how they play together. Because you have really good SEO, but bad CRO, conversion optimization, on your website, it doesn't matter, because people are going to come to your website and leave because they're not going to be engaged and convert and get in and through the funnel. So,
Mm.
and that's relevant for both paid and organic strategies. And that's also, we can talk about push versus pull marketing, whether you're pushing a message to an audience you're trying to reach that's not aware of you, versus being found for what they're looking for, but they may or may not know about your brand yet. So there's pushing the message and then pulling them. So it's like chasing versus attracting, if you will.
Mm. Sure. That it's very technical, hey? There's a lot that goes into engineering good results for companies to be found online. And I think a lot of people tend to underestimate how much goes into it, right? Because, like you said, it's not just looking for the keywords or the correct hashtags to use on your social media pages or anything like that. There's a lot more into it. Um,
Yeah.
with that to consider, at what stage of growth should a startup then invest in SEO, and how does that compare to investing in like paid channels, sort of like Google ads and Facebook ads?
So, like, when should they? It's my opinion you should start right at the beginning with SEO,
Mm.
because it takes time to build that. But if you're wanting fast results, then you want to pair that with a paid strategy. And really, part of it also too is, it's like, um, it might have to do with where your budgets are at and things like that. Like, if you've got funding and you're able to play a little bit more of the long term game, I mean, I would say go for SEO, because it's going to be your best return on investment if you're going to look at the strategies as one or the other. But I would look at them both, like, how can you learn one, because essentially, like, think of SEO as like building equity, like buying a home, versus like PPC as like renting traffic or renting a home. The good thing is you can get it immediately, and you can start learning from a lot of the things. Like, you can get landing page feedback on the data, you can get keyword data and things like that instantly, because you're renting traffic, you can buy it immediately. But the problem is, the minute you stop paying for it, you lose it. And organic is actually really important, because you're building equity. It's literally an asset. If you're looking at as a VC, if you're looking for an exit, when you build organic presence, you're building an asset for your company, actually, because your online, that can't be replaced. I mean, it takes a lot of work and consistency and know-how to get you to have that positioning. And once you have it, it's by far the best quality of traffic and by far the best return on investment. When you look at things like cost per acquisition and ROAS, return on ad spend, which are really important metrics in really, well, particularly in PPC, but in all digital marketing, like omni-channel approach, you always want to look into all of your marketing spends and what is your cost per acquisition per dollar spent on different strategies. And as long as they're, at least profitable, they're good. You want to have all of them that are profitable, but the most profitable tends to be organic, and it's the most trusted because people just know that they're savvy enough now, or that they know the difference between a sponsored ad and organic listing. And it's like,
Mm.
you can know there's an ad, which can be relevant and really good. There's a lot of things you can control about that, but they just trust when that you've been vetted as the one of the top 3 ranking websites in Google for a certain search query, and now all these other answer engines, and they're all kind of validating you as the true best. That's better than buying your way through ads, but sometimes you have to use ads to create awareness, and there's different
Mm.
reasons why, like different depending on what you're selling. Sometimes if you're a emerging market, or if you're like say you're doing events or something that's got a really short time, like a shelf life on it, basically, you're going to have to use different strategies depending on what you're trying to do, and usually they go hand in hand.
Mm. Okay. Okay. That makes sense. There was something that you mentioned in your previous answer to this one. So you mentioned a lot about how there's a few changes, especially when it comes to searching for businesses online with the Google AI and sorts and all that sorts of stuff. How do you think AI is changing the search behavior, and how companies and how should they adapt to this change?
Man, it's such an invigorating, exciting time to be in the world of search, honestly, because it's kind of like
Mm.
the wild, wild west all over again. I mean, we were like I told you, we are doing link building before Google was around, and we were early on the side of figuring out the algorithm of Google and how to get into search of Google. Now search has changed dramatically with all the AI stuff. So there's a few things. Okay, so let's talk about, first of all, let's talk about Google. Okay, it used to always be that you were trying to get traffic from Google, but now you've
Mm-hmm.
probably noticed that there's that's the and the sorry the AI overview part of Google, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when you type in a search query, you don't necessarily go to a website. You see a summary
A
of various
summary.
websites, yeah, overviewed, right? And that's what we call surfacing now. You're like
Mm-hmm.
surfacing and you're getting essentially an impression now. Impressions are way more important now than they used to be, because people are doing what's called no click marketing or zero click marketing these days, because it's
Yeah.
about getting placement or surfacing within the AI overview section. Um, and you have to do that through getting yourself found on lots of different places, and your website's also included. So you still get traffic from AI overview, but you've probably seen how you have to, like, you see the AI overview and then there's a link within it, and then you
Mm-hmm.
click within that. So you're getting actually a lot of phone calls and a lot of things like that are happening right directly on the SERP itself, the search engine results page itself. So we used to always say that once all your on-page optimization is tight, that links lead to rankings, to impressions, to traffic, to conversion. But now it's kind of like links lead to rankings, to impressions, to conversion. And you still get traffic, but it's coming in a different way. And that's just the Google side of things. Now, let's talk about answer engines, LLMs, or there's a lot of terms for this, but essentially the Chat GPTs, Gemini, Claude, Gork, all these different platforms, they're building their knowledge base in a very similar way. And the way that you want to be found in those places, um, it's about, like I said before, it's about surfacing or being kind of found as this thought leader, and then knowing that a lot of this is no longer, like, currently right now, is not trackable. Like, we're seeing it's a really interesting shift in metrics that we look for KPIs right now, because we're noticing that a lot of our clients who've been established for 3 years or more, and they've been getting steady year on year, month on month traffic growth, are now starting to see a dip in traffic from Google. But guess what they're getting? More conversion, better quality metrics. So when you look at all the things like engagement rate, particularly, is a really big thing. So that's number of events per session, essentially, is what engagement is. Engagement rate. So they're getting more quality traffic, so better engaged traffic. And when they get leads, they're more like they're more qualified. They're more specific to what they're trying to attract. So it's a better refinement of search. Like there's a lot less white noise traffic, or we actually have a term internally we call Uncle Buck traffic, because we have a client who does jump starter batteries, and they supply it, they white label it, and they do for all the checker and AutoZones, all these different places. But they have this blog post that's about it's about the top 10 car movies, and there's a scene in Uncle Buck that this guy uses a jump starter to start his car or whatever, and they get all this traffic around Uncle Buck, and nobody buys anything on Uncle Buck traffic, but so they're dropping in traffic, and you're like, oh no, we're losing traffic, but who cares about Uncle Buck traffic? Because it's not purchasing anything. And on the other side of things, where you're looking at leads being generated, imagine the
Mm,
administrative cost and efficiency of sifting through a bunch of irrelevant leads. So
mm,
you're actually getting more efficiency with less traffic. And that's that. I mean, there's so much I could talk about with all this stuff, with the integration of voice search and how, people are using their Siri now, right? So Siri is integrated with ChatGPT now.
yeah.
So rather than going to Google typing in a thing, you pull up Siri and be like, hey, here's my question. And then Siri pulls ChatGPT in to answer your question, and you're getting informed without picking up your computer and typing anything. You're just learning that way. And then later on, then you just like go to the brand's name, and then you just type in that thing, or you click on the result within ChatGPT, and then it's stored in your browser. And then from then on, it's just direct traffic. So you just come in from a browser load, because your browser remembers where you were before, or you remember, but usually it's just based on your search history, and it'll pull it up automatically as you start to type it in, and it'll remember where you were.
Mm.
Not to mention into remarketing and a lot of the things that happen once people come to your website, and to remind them of your brand, because they say it takes like 7 impressions to remember your brand. So there's a whole other layer of post visit remarketing that we could talk about later if you want.
It's actually so refreshing to hear how excited you are by all of these changes. I think a lot of the conversations that many people are having out there, people are sort of scared of these changes and
Yeah.
what and the influences. So it was very refreshing
Yeah.
to hear an excited, sort of very keen response from you with all of that. And yeah, it makes it very
My scope
obvious that
level. Yeah. Stoked. I mean, we just love this stuff, and we've been tracking for so long, and we're seeing all the trends. And my business partner is an absolute genius. I call him the grandmaster of SEO, and he's in all the forums, and he's a big contributor in all those forums, and following all the blogs. And we're working with consultants, big name consultants with big name clients. So we're having a lot of elevated conversations about this, and we're excited and stoked, because we know we're separating ourselves apart from all the ones who are still like focused on keyword
mm,
rankings and like long metrics. It's like metrics are shifting, and it's like it's always been about conversion, and we know that. So now we're seeing that it's all coming to fruition now, and it's beautiful for us.
yeah, definitely. I think there's so much to unpack, and you've made it very clear in this conversation, but obviously time is against us. So I do think we will need to have quite a few follow-up conversations after this. But just before we start wrapping things up, I do want to find out from you, where should founders start if they want to sort of build long-term organic visibility with very little overhead?
Well, I'd say really focus on first, you first of all have to have a good website as a beginning place, but you can do that really easily these days with Shopify and WordPress and a lot of these templates that are available out there. You got to have a good website as kind of like your base platform, right? But you also have to have a really good content strategy, and that's both on and off page, like I said before. So you got to make sure that you're focused on having a good landing page experience that really sells what you're offering. It's like when we look at CRO, there's four. I try to keep this fast, but there's four main things you want to think about. Is on your landing page, you got to have strong value proposition, calls to action, offers, and user experience. So those are some things to think about, and you can also make sure you're looking at competition to make sure you're aware of all those four main factors of the other websites that are ranking. Okay, so
Mhm.
website itself, as your platform, is a really important place. The that's on page. Okay. And then off page, you got to have a really strong content strategy to be able to get yourself noticed and found and included in the conversations that are happening out there around the topic that you want to be the leader in. And don't try to be the leader in the entire industry. Find your niche within the niche. Really be really clear on what is my perfect client or my perfect customer or customers, because there's going to be multiple segments a lot of times where you're attracting different types of people, but you really want to make sure you know exactly what you're going after before you even get started. And there's a whole exercise, and you can even use ChatGPT. Go in there and be like, here's what I'm trying to sell, help me identify my audience, and ChatGPT will help you identify that audience. And from there, then you want to go out and build your website and start creating your content. There's a lot of things with social, and there's different things. It always depends on what you're pushing and where it's at in terms of like, how well it has matured in terms of like, is this a brand new like emerging product or service, or is this something that's well established? And that will kind of also dictate a little bit on, are you going to be needing to do push marketing to create awareness and draw them to you, or sorry, and sell to them
Yeah.
essentially, or are you going to there's already demand, and are you going to be attracting them to you based on that demand that's already there? So
Mm,
it's kind of
okay.
a lot, but honestly, just you got to start somewhere. So that's where I would start.
But it's a good thing that it's a lot, because then people are going to realize how much effort needs to go into it, right? So yeah, I think
Yeah.
this has been such a grounded and very practical conversation. What stands out to me at this point is that SEO, it isn't just a channel, but it's rather a strategic asset that builds momentum. So for any founder or operator who's thinking long term, it's clear that the organic growth isn't a luxury, but it's rather a leverage. So on that note, I think, Justin, that's where you would come in. So where can people who are interested in your services or getting your help, where can they contact you?
Well, probably the easiest way is through our website, webtek.co. We are rebranding back to our original, which is webtekmarketing.com. And you can find us there. I think we've got that all set up, Webtek Marketing. But just remember, there's actually a few Webteks out there. So look for the one that's based in Utah and Austin. And maybe you can link it up in the podcast here. But
Mm-hmm.
webtek.co, Webtek Marketing, you can Google us. You can find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, these other ones. But our website's the best place to find us. And I can just give you one more, just an email address if you want to just email us, info@webtek.co. Again, webtek.co. Info@webtek.co. You can email us, webtek.co. Come find us.
Perfect. Thank you again, Justin. Like I said, it's been a very practical conversation, very grounded. So thank you for those insights. And yeah, until next time, let's keep rising and building growth engines that compound over time.